Hi, Charles SirBookSage here, and welcome to my OKORATOBER wrap-up video. It was a really good reading experience. It was intended to just be October, where I was going to dive more into the catalog of Nnedi Okorafor. But I ended up just taking my time because work got even busier than it's been this year. And I realized halfway through October, you know what? I don't need to lock myself into this arbitrary time frame. I'm just going to read what I want to read of this readathon until I'm done. So I took my time and enjoyed the books I read over the course of October and November. Just a couple of days ago, I finished off the readathon. Now, I didn't actually get to every single thing that I put on my OKORATOBER TBR, but I did get to most of it. And I ended up reading 3 novels, 3 novellas, 1 graphic novel, 1 short story, and 1 flash fiction. There was 1 3-star, 7 4-stars, and 1 5-star read. And I'm super happy that the 5-star read ended up being the book that I was the most looking forward to. Ever since I discovered that this book existed, I've just been dying to read it. And something told me that I would really enjoy it. And I did. And it might actually be my favorite Nnedi Okorafor book at this point. But we'll get into that. I decided also, as far as reading order goes, that I was just going to wing it. I was just going to go with my gut. And I started off reading The Girl with the Magic Hands. And it's just a simple short story about a young girl in this little village who she goes off, she has to get water and bring it back to the house because there's no plumbing and things. And she ends up hearing these voices in the woods and goes to explore. And then that starts her down this journey of where art becomes like a transformational thing. And it makes big changes to her parents and their marriage, the town that she lives in. It was really ended up being the perfect start for this reading project for me. Because when it comes to fantasy, I'm an epic fantasy, high fantasy reader. And as far as fantasy goes, I'm currently reading the Malazan series. As the story was going along, I was really enjoying it. My epic fantasy reading brain kept waiting for, okay, when's the horrible tragedy going to strike? And it never did. And then when it was done, I realized, oh, that was just a really nice fable, a really nice feel-good story. And I realized, okay, I've got to turn off the epic fantasy brain and just open my mind and just go and explore. Don't expect anything because she doesn't write epic fantasy. She writes African futurism and African jujuism. That's her brand of science fiction and of fantasy, where it's rooted in African culture in one way or another. So it was the perfect thing for me to start this reading project off with, because it really did make me stop and sit back and reframe my mind. And then next up, I went into Akata Witch. Now, her Akata Witch and Akata Warrior books, a lot of people will describe them as like the Nigerian Harry Potter, which, as far as I know, she's not a fan of that description, and neither am I. I mean, there's going to be some just general similarities you're going to have when you have a sort of secret magical world that exists side by side with our world. But this is its own story, its own unique kind of magic. And even magic isn't really even the right word. Like, it's kind of magic in Hogwarts and stuff. But this is something, it's different. This is like something deep-seated and deep-rooted in many ways culturally. Now, you have what's known as leopard people. They're people who have some sort of, if you want to use the term, magic. And then they refer to the non-magics as lambs. And leopard people exist all over the world, and the main character is Sunny. Now, she's really an interesting character because this is in Nigeria. Her whole family, they're all Nigerian. Her parents grew up there, got married, had their first 2 sons in Nigeria, and then moved to America, where she was born. And she lived there for the first, 5, 6, 7 years of her life, maybe. And then they've since come back to Nigeria. So even though she's completely Nigerian, because she was born in America, the people around her look at her as an outsider. She's an American in their eyes. And she's also an albino, which separates her even further. I'm not going to do spoiler stuff, but basically she ends up having a vision that starts her down this road to discovering that she's one of the leopard people. It's what's known as a free agent, where you're not necessarily born into this family, this kind of thing where they pop up here and there. She starts down that road and becomes friends with Chi-Chi, Orlu, and Sasha. And Sasha is from America as well. He's actually, I guess, African American, and who's been sent over here to live temporarily with Orlu's family because he got himself into some serious trouble. So his parents send him to Africa to basically learn how to behave, particularly in this leopard world. And it goes from there. And I really enjoyed the first book. It's a great series introduction book. You meet the main characters. You start learning about the world, what the rules are. And it was really, really well done, really entertaining. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, I didn't immediately dive into Akata Warrior after that. What I did instead was I read the flash fiction, Hello Moto. And again, just spur of the moment, kind of went with my gut. And it's really, really short, again, just a few pages. There's 3 main characters, 3 women, one of whom made these wigs that are part magic, part technology, for her and her friends, that give them these extra abilities. And something's gone wrong, and now she's trying to stop them. And it's really, really quick, but a really, really interesting concept. And Nnedi Okorafor describes it as part science fiction, part witchcraft, and part Nollywood, which is, I guess, Nigeria is kind of Hollywood. Like India has Bollywood, I guess Nigeria has Nollywood. And I didn't really get the Nollywood reference because, one of the characters steals a Nollywood DVD, so I just assumed that was it. When I started reading, and that was a 3-star read for me, Hello Moto. Again, it was just so short, 3 stars is about all I can give it. But the concept is really, really interesting, and I hope it's something that she revisits in the future. Even if it's not in that story with those women, it's just revisited somewhere else because the technological parts were really cool. But anyway, so then I started reading Akata Warrior, and what made my choice just out of the blue to read Hello Moto in between was early in the book, Sunny goes with Orlu to visit Orlu's aunt, who's not well, and she's a lamb. And when they get there, she's watching a TV, she's watching a Nollywood movie. And Nnedi Okorafor makes a reference to these really bad wigs the actresses have on. And that's what then clicked with me, because the Hello Moto was about these wigs, and they were in pretty bad shape at this point in the story that we get. And then I got the Nollywood reference. And had I not read Hello Moto, just kind of on the spur, in between the 2 Akata books, the mention of the bad wigs I wouldn't even really noticed it. It wouldn't have meant anything to me. But because I read Hello Moto in between, it clicked and I got the reference, which then means I got the little flash fiction story a little more about what she meant by Nollywood and just kind of playing fun with the wigs, apparently. So I've never seen a Nollywood movie, but I assume some bad wigs is something it's kind of some of them are known for. But maybe I'll have to find a movie to check out. I don't know if Netflix has any Nollywood or not. Akata Warrior, I thought was fantastic. Really, really enjoyed it. Even more than Akata Witch. So even though I gave both 4 stars on Goodreads, I might give Akata Witch 3.75 stars and Akata Warrior 4 stars, or maybe 4 stars and 4.25 stars. But because Akata Warrior is a better book, it's more rounded, it's richer, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward. She's already sent a draft of the next one in, so she submitted that, so I don't know where that is in the process at this point, but I'm really, really looking forward to the next one. There's still a lot more to be explored. We're just barely touching the surface of so much of that world. And the characters are really, really interesting. And one thing of note is their currency is this thing called chitim. And you earn it through knowledge. So the person with the most chitim isn't the richest person. It's the person who's learned the much and experienced the most and gifted in terms of ability the most. So I thought that was really, really cool, that currency and money was tied to actually accomplishment. Not just, you're not born into it. You have to actually earn it, each individual. So I really, really like that concept. There's also this thing known as an OHA coven, and there's always a team of 4, and Sunny, Chi-Chi, Orlu, and Sasha become an OHA coven. But they're the first one of basically students only. Usually OHA covens are experienced people who've hit a certain level of accomplishment and knowledge. It's sort of like, almost like a martial art where there's like different belts, and they have none. So they're the first time an OHA covenant has come along where they're this young. But they're tasked in the first book with solving this particular violent mystery that's been ongoing throughout the book. But I cannot wait for the next Akata book, because just really, really good stuff. And I'm trying to not be spoiler here, so I'm just trying to kind of touch on these without giving like spoiler reviews. I think I'm going to need to do another reread or 2 before I sit down and do like any official like book review for these. After the Akata books, I finally got to Lagoon, which is the book I've been just dying to read of Nnedi Okorafor since I first came across it. And this is the one I gave 5 stars. Lagoon is about basically alien first contact on Earth. But they land in the water just outside of Lagos in Nigeria, which is one of the largest cities in the world. Big, sprawling place. From just the description of the city itself was really fascinating. Reading it kind of in some ways makes you want to go there, but in other ways there's so much unrest and violence taking place there now. It's not any part of the world that I would venture just because of the civil unrest taking place there right now. One of the things I really enjoyed is, as they mention places in Lagos, I would pull up Google Maps and try to like find where they were, because there's some actual real world spots that are mentioned in the book, a beach in particular. So I mean, that I thought was pretty cool. And this again is about aliens arriving, and they basically arrive in the water just offshore of Lagos. And as soon as they arrive, their presence begins transforming the marine life. Things start happening, and these like even fish and things in the water start evolving. And it's really interesting approach, because you don't normally, every alien first contact is they show up and they want to talk to people. But this, it's like, nope, they just start interacting with what's in the water first and begin slowly making their presence known. And this book ends up following like 3 people. And one's a soldier, one's like a hip-hop star, and the other is, I think, a scientist. They're met by an alien ambassador. They kind of come up out of the water, and they can transform to look like humans. And it's their story of everything happening around them, this crazy chaos of what happens to a society when aliens start showing up. So there's distrust and violence, and there's this sort of religious group her character's husband is like part of, and really, really, really interesting characters, really well done. I really just want to reread that book all over again. And one of the things that I really liked as well is in Akata Warrior, they actually have to go to Lagos to accomplish this mission. And there's this spider, this sort of like almost like a deity that lives under the city in Akata Warrior, and that deity or that god, a spider god, is mentioned briefly in this book as well, in Lagoon. But again, there's not a lot I can say about it other than I just thought it was a fascinating first contact story, very different than a lot of other first contact stories, because just really, really well done. One of my favorite things about Nnedi Okorafor is she has a really unique imagination, and she takes stories to places you don't expect. Even things that are familiar, like the Akata Witch, you're going to recognize just familiar things. It's teenagers, coming of age, magic, all that stuff. But she really takes stories in very different directions than what you expect. And I just love Lagoon, and man, that would make a great movie. But anyway, thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was my most anticipated book. The moment I discovered that it existed and read the little synopsis, it's just like a book that's been calling to me ever since. So I'm glad I finally got here and finally got to read it. And it not only lived up to all my hopes, it surpassed them. I think it has supplanted Who Fears Death as my favorite Nnedi Okorafor book. Each one is going to need a reread for me to really decide which one holds the top spot, but I think it's Lagoon. After Lagoon, I ended up reading LaGuardia, a graphic novel. This was released, I think, in a 4-part miniseries, and Lagoon, this LaGuardia is kind of a sequel to Lagoon in a way. It's set in the same storyline, but just a few years later, and it deals with the impact aliens have had on the world. And we follow a character who she leaves Nigeria, comes to the U.S. She's got family there, and she smuggles in an alien that looks like a plant. It's kind of allegoric for like racism and bigotry and all of that. The artwork is beautiful. I really enjoyed it. It was good to get a glimpse of more in depth of what transformation is taking place on Earth as a result of this. The Lagoon novel and LaGuardia are tie into the Binti stories. Binti stories take place in this sort of same overall story construct where aliens have come to Earth. And the Binti books are a bit later on now where, there's a lot more of this stuff integrated in. I don't know the exact timeline, but they are connected to each other. They're all part of the same overarching story world that she's created. Okay, which brings me to the Binti novellas, which was the last thing I read for this OKORATOBER. There's Binti, which is the first book, which won the Hugo and Nebula Awards for Best Novella. And then there's Binti Home. And then there's Binti, The Night Masquerade. Hopefully my lens is actually focusing on those. But my recommendation is just read all 3 straight through. Treat it as one story, because it is one story. She just ended up writing it as a novella and then continued on in the other 2 parts. And she actually developed the story backwards. She had the ending first, then the middle, then the beginning, but obviously you rewrite and publish beginning, middle, end. But I really, really enjoyed this as well. Binti is one of the Himba tribe in Africa, and she's the first one, a Himba, to leave Earth and go to this galactic Umza University. And she does this pretty much on her own, not telling her family. She just does the interviews and everything in private and secret, and then just goes without saying anything. And she's on the ship carrying all these other people from Earth. And she's the only Himba, and she's kind of, an outsider, because the rest of the people on the ship are from a group of people that look down on the Himba and treat them almost as servants. But she starts making some friends, and the only spoiler I'm going to give is the ship on its way to the university is attacked. And then it's everything that happens from there by this other species called the Medusa. And book 1 is her journey getting to this university. And then book 2 is her at the university and then needing to go home because there's this pilgrimage that the Himba go through, the women do, it's like a rite of passage to become like a woman who can be married and all that stuff. And then book 3 is everything that goes down as a result of her coming back and her bringing one of her alien friends with her. And book 3 in particular, it gets really heavy and heart-wrenching as well. But then again, like I mentioned earlier, Nnedi is the type of author who does the unexpected. And where I thought this story was going to end, she took it in a whole different direction, which really like rattled me at first. And I was actually almost annoyed. It's like, which at this tragic event happens, and then something else happens that I was not expecting. And I was almost annoyed because, what? That's not supposed to happen. But then I realized, again, stop with your expectations and just go with the story. And then I saw what she was doing, and I was like, oh, okay. And I just took a look back at the first novella because I was looking up a couple things. And I noticed something that now that I've read the whole thing, I was like, whoa. It's like, and again, and which brought back the interview that she wrote the end first. She wrote the story backwards. And then I saw something, and I was reading, just looking up something, and I was like, well, I'll be. It's like, there it is, sitting right there. But you don't notice the first time around. And that's all I'm going to say. But Binti, really fascinating character. Her friend, Oku, the Meduse, is alien. He's really, really cool, too. Their friendship they develop is really, really, I like it a lot. I would love more stuff. Oku, in particular, and the Meduse, really, really interesting group of aliens. And it'd be really fun to see more stuff. And hopefully so, because again, Lagoon, LaGuardia, the Binti books, they're all part of this overarching story construct. So hopefully there's more stories to come in this particular version of the universe she's created. Just as the Akata books are connected to Who Fears Death and the Book of Phoenix. I'm curious to see where the Akata books are going, knowing what's coming later. So just really exciting, and there's a few books I didn't get to that I have, which will go in next year's OKORATOBER. Plus she has already in January, she's got another book coming out. So there'll be plenty more Nnedi Okorafor to read. My final thoughts real quick, because my battery is about to die. This was a wonderful reading experience. If you haven't read Nnedi Okorafor, I highly recommend her. Again, it's African futurism and African jujuism, which are not just generic sci-fi or anything. If you go to my announcement video, I've got links to some videos and information that describes more about what these types of genres of fiction are. And she's just a wonderful, wonderful storyteller, and I'm looking forward to rereading all of these. Every single thing I read, I'd reread again. I'm looking forward to the next round next year. And maybe I'll do some reading challenges and things like that. I don't know. Maybe I'll turn it into like a readathon. Who knows? For now, it's just for me. But again, highly recommend it. Lagoon was outstanding. The Akata books, really, really wonderful. And the Binti Trilogy, novella trilogy, I, again, really enjoyed. Any one of these is a good introduction to her as a writer and as a story creator and a storyteller. And I think that's a wrap for OKORATOBER 2020, my inaugural one. And again, I'm looking forward to doing this again next year. And I am Charles of SirBookSage. Happy reading.